Great. Hi, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're just getting everybody logged in. Yeah. That's the chat, live stream chat. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a couple of minutes, just waiting for people to log in. And Katia, we're sure this is on live? Okay, great. Hello, Ashley. Hi, everybody. Well, say a quick hello so that we know you're here with me. Excited to see all of you today. I'm glad we have day 2. The good news is that 3 hours ago, I had no power in my house. And I was starting to have another like, oh shit, we're gonna have to cancel this again. But the emotion regulation god came out and gave us power. Hashtag country living. Welcome, everybody. I see we got Ashley, we got Tracy, we got Jill, we got Chris, we got Phoenix, we got Lori, Beth, Brad, Nicole. We even have Kadil. Kadil, you're there, right? I thought we are supposed to do like a little like back and forth with you as the producer here. Okay. Hello, Deidre. Hello, Manta. Whenever I say hello to people, I always think of my childhood. There was a TV show called The Magic Garden when I was a very young kid, and it was these two women who just sat in a swing, and it's like a preschool show, and it was just what I watched as a kid. Hey, Mark, and Kristen, and others who are coming in. We're gonna start at like 7:03 just to give people the chance to join. Uh-oh. Okay. Everybody, as you join, just give us a quick hello so we can know where y'all coming from. And we'll give it another 2 minutes and then we'll jump in. Looking forward to tonight. Tonight, we're going to do a deep dive into co-regulation, but I'm going to give it another minute before I get started. Hello, Jackie from the Center for Emotional Intelligence. Welcome. This is great. All right, it's 7:03, and we're going to give it 10 more seconds, and then we're going to jump in. Ooh. All right, countdown 3, 2, 1. Take a nice long inhale, Mark. All right. Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of the Dealing with Feeling Book Club. Super excited to be with all of you today. And we're just going to jump right into thinking about co-regulation today. But before we I shouldn't say we're going to jump right in. First, we're going to do a little check-in like we normally do. So, Kitty, I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure that works. My window, my slides. I'm going to share. And you should be able to see those slides. Looks like we can see them. And let's just do a quick check-in. How are we feeling this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you're at? Do a quick check-in, what you're feeling, and importantly, as you know, what's your strategy? Let's get it going. So the big question is, how are you feeling? And what's your strategy for getting the most out of tonight? Knowing that it's late at night for someone like me, it's 7 p.m. So after this, I'm going to go have dinner. The dinner's already prepared, which I'm really excited about. We had a power shortage today, so it was a bit hectic. There was a lot of rain and broken trees and or falling trees and wires all over the place. Actually couldn't leave. Every direction I went from my house in Connecticut, there was a wire falling. All right, so we got Beth is feeling relieved and Dory's feeling peaceful, and we got Kelly who's feeling pleasant, hopeful, and peaceful. All right, well, that's a good beginning. Do you have your strategies for dealing with your feelings? So in the spirit of moving on, because I know that all of you are eager to learn new things tonight, I wanted to start off with this. I built a slide the other day when I was in California doing a presentation, because I can't tell you how much pushback there has been over the last couple of weeks about this work in school-based work. We call it social and emotional learning. At the center, we call it emotional intelligence, which is our framework or our model and our theory. And Ruler is a product. It is an approach to cultivating emotional intelligence in schools and other locations, obviously in my book. And so a few kind of things I want to talk about tonight before we jump into co-regulation. The first is this idea that it's personality. And we've covered a little bit of this before, but I want to make sure we really unpack it. Personality is personality. Emotion regulation is emotion regulation. The best way I think I can clarify this for you is that our personality or our temperament is our proclivity towards experience the world a certain way. So I'm a neurotic introvert, which means that I worry a lot and I'm by myself too often. That's a joke, sort of. But that's my tendency. My tendency is to be a little bit kind of moody. My tendency is to be a bit up and down in my emotions. That's the neuroticism. And my introversion is my preference for kind of small groups, uh, and being quiet, not that big kind of gregarious type. That's a preference for the way we experience the world. It's how we tend to approach things. But emotion regulation is what we do with that. And so, as I always say, that people like me who are more mercurial, we're actually better at regulating emotions in some instances. Why? Because we got a lot of opportunities to do it. And the person who's more even keeled may actually not be so practiced, because if they get overwhelmed or they get the curveball, all of a sudden they don't know what to do with their feelings. So, my point is that the correlation coefficient, using research terms, meaning the relationship between temperament, personality, and emotional intelligence, emotion regulation in particular, is very low. I never used to believe that. I used to think it's the same thing. It's not. Hope that's clear. The second is that you were not born this way. I love Lady Gaga, but you were not born this way. This is 100% learned. It is not about self control. I think people over kind of emphasize that whole piece that it's controlling ourselves. No, we're not controlling ourselves. What we're doing is we're learning how to use our emotions wisely. It's not about avoiding discomfort. Just want to say that out loud, like really loud. Life is about being uncomfortable. We have, stress in our jobs. We're not going to get rid of stress. I don't know about you, but I haven't achieved anything of great value that has not caused me negative emotions. So we're not about avoiding discomfort, we're about managing it. It's not about controlling kids, it's about helping kids build life skills. There are no correct strategies. Just want to say that loudly. That oftentimes people are like, what's the best strategy? There is no best strategy. There's a wide range of strategies that we're going to apply to our lives. And so there's no correct or criterion of correctness, as we call it, other than no harm to self or others. That's all about self-regulation. That's not true. It is also about co-regulation, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about tonight. I'm excited to dig deeply into co-regulation. And this is not about therapy. Certain people need therapy. I've had therapy. I value therapy. I think in many ways we should all see therapists at some point in our lives. But that's not what ruler is. That's not what emotion regulation is. Emotion regulation is a set of skills that help us navigate the full range of emotions. So I'm going to stop here for a minute, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to digest that. And then I want you to ask questions. What will be helpful for you in terms of me, any clarifying questions? So I'm going to just sit with this for a minute. We have a little bit of a delay in terms of, the time that I speak to the time that it gets on YouTube to the time that you give us the questions, but it's okay. We can all do a little breathing exercise while we wait for people to jump in with their questions. So take a moment and reflect. What's coming up for you that might be helpful for me to clarify? One question that I see so far is, why is it not about self-control? Because, well, I shouldn't say it's not about self-control. It's not just about self-control. Meaning there are times when, Mark, don't eat the donut. I was going to say French fry, but I never eat French fries. But once in a while, I want a piece of cookie or a cake. So my point is that that's a minor, it's a miniature piece of emotion regulation. And I don't want people to be minimizing the concept to, impulse control, delayed gratification. I want us to think of emotion regulation as using a wide range of strategies to help us achieve our goals in life. So sometimes it's about initiating a really pleasant emotion to be inspiring, like I'm trying to do right now in this book club. I'm not sure if I'm inspiring right now, but I'm trying to be high energy, right? For all of you, it's in the evening for me. And so I'm trying to keep the energy up. So emotion regulation is it's not just about control. It's about using all of our emotions wisely. What else do we have here? So Irene, welcome. Good to see you in LA just a few days ago. Irene is saying, I think that we're born this way misconception is huge. Even reading it and understanding there are studies behind it. I think that culturally we've been conditioned to think we're born with it. I couldn't agree more. And Because what we do is we create fixed mindsets about other people based on their temperament and personality. She's the angry one. He's the depressed one. And then we conflate that with he can't deal with his sad feelings and she can't deal with her angry feelings. And we got to move away from that thinking because it is not true. So, how do you deal with siblings? I think that, importantly, we have to set boundaries for ourselves and for other people, meaning that you have to choose to be the best version of yourself and be a role model. I think I've shared this last week, but I'll share it again because it's one of my big things. Is that I think that emotion regulation for me is the ultimate kind of form of like wisdom and creativity. And so I have this rule now, in which sometimes they break, but it's nothing you can say is going to get under my skin. I'm just going to be a wizard. I'm going to be the Yoda of emotion regulation and be creative with it. That's my choice. I can't choose whether my husband, Horacio, doesn't regulate well, whether Kirill doesn't regulate well, whether everybody else doesn't. I can just be the best possible role model and be a healthy co-regulator, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. Let me look at some other things that people have said. Give me 1 second. So there's a question about ADHD. Clearly, I think people with ADHD will have more difficulty with regulating. I think part of what we can do to support people who have ADHD is give them more of a plan. So that self-awareness piece about their attention challenges is helpful. Being more proactive with like very clear go-to strategies, kind of like a behavior modification kind of work would be helpful. Yes, our responses are like memory, muscle memory. Good question there. So temperament can impact us. So for example, if you're someone who is high in neuroticism like me, it will I will have to learn more strategies to deal with the high energy difficult emotions. So I'll have to kind of like specialize in like Mark's intensity. So that's a good question. I like that a lot. But that's the self-awareness piece. Someone's asking about kids. We're going to get into co-regulation in a minute. Yes, expressing emotions can be hard. We have to, I think part of the goal that I have for the work is that we make make this kind of just the way we operate. Like it's not secretive. And so the more environments that welcome expressing emotions, the better. With that said, some people have pushed back against this, like Mark, in the corporate sector, in the nonprofit sector, in law firms. You do have to have agreed upon norms. And so it is not cool to talk about feelings all day long at work. We have to get work done. And so I do want to say that out loud. We do need norms, but they should be collective norms. I do have favorite emotion regulation strategies. I'll get to those in a minute. Someone asked when I say behavior modification, what I mean is that if I can learn my patterns, meaning if I can know that, and this is a tough one for people with ADD or ADHD, that, when I'm anxious, I tend to, be more forgetful, which makes my partner angry, like that kind of triangle thing. We can work on, the anxiety up front, meaning I can, or not put myself into situations, that are going to create the anxiety. So be more prevention focused. That's what I'm kind of getting at there. I think prevention of unpleasant emotions is, it's a very behavioral thing because we talk about it as situational modification or situational selection. So situational selection is I know that when I hang out with this one person, it makes me anxious and then I get all worked up and then I don't do well. That's Mark. Don't go out with that friend. This is not going to be a good week to do that. Don't do it. Situational modification is I'm with that person or someone else. I see things not going in the direction that are going to be helpful to me. And I'm like, Mark, don't sit next to your aunt tonight. Go sit next to somebody else who's not going to activate you. That's all from that prevention standpoint. Okay, we're going to move on. Hope that was helpful. And always glad to answer questions. I think that makes this the most interesting. So going back to our thesis here, the major goal of emotion regulation is to move from automatic, habitual, and unhelpful ways of dealing with our emotions to conscious, deliberate, helpful ways. Good? Okay. We went through our formula. I want to give you a minute to process the formula again because that's a lot and it is the central thesis. And someone did call me out on this. And it really, whether it's a plus or an enter. I think it is more of an X, to be honest with you. If I were to do this over, I would make it E times P times C, not the G plus S. The G plus S is right, but it's the emotion by personality, by context kind of interaction to not get too technical there. But so I'm going to fix my formula. So let's take a moment and just go back to our formula for emotion regulation. And been presenting this at different conferences and talks that I've been giving over the last week. It's been well received, but people really want to unpack it. So are there any questions about the formula? Because the formula will guide kind of the rest of the work that we do together. So I'm going to give you a second to think about that. Emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies. Those goals are the prime goals: prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance. The strategies are all of the different strategies, the 7 kind of buckets in the book. And then remember the emotion by the person, by the context. So I see this as emotion regulation is working on goals and strategies depending on the person and the context. That's correct. That's 100% correct. So, the goals and strategies that I use will vary as a function of what I'm feeling, who I am as an individual, and I don't think I said this last week, but that person piece is also my values. Meaning, do I value the person that I'm regulating with? If I don't value them, then maybe I'll use an unhelpful strategy. And certainly the context. What I mean by function is that it just means it's the combination, the function of those 3 things together. So that's all. Just basically those are put into one formula. This is related to the work in social psychology by the famous psychologist Kurt Lewin, who says behavior equals a function of the person and the environment. So I'm saying emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies that are a function of the emotion, the person, and the context. Okay. Any more questions about our formula for emotion regulation? Well, always can write me. So we define emotion regulation as the thoughts and actions that we use to prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance emotions, right, in order to make sound decisions, have greater well-being, build and maintain positive relationships, and attain goals. We're clear about that. We need both self-regulation and we need co-regulation. And I think most of us have spent an enormous amount of time around emotion self-regulation, meaning we're just endlessly thinking about, Mark, take a deep breath. Mark, don't say it. But I don't think we spend enough time having an other orientation, or thinking about co-regulation. So we're going to go there today. So I created these slides today. I just want to kind of talk through them, and then we'll go back and forth with some questions, and I'll help to clarify. So I think the first kind of premise for co-regulation is that we're permeable. That whether we like it or not, emotions flow between people. We're a constant interaction between people. That whether it's friend and friend, whether it's friend and whoever, kid and parent, teacher and kid, boss and employee, there's a constant flow of emotion. I want to say something that's important about co-regulation. It is intentional, meaning it means guiding another person's emotion with warmth, empathy, and specific strategies. It's different than reacting. So, when your significant other or your mom or your dad says, I can't take it anymore, and then I can't take it anymore either. That is not co-regulation. That is family dynamics and reacting. Co-regulation is when I notice that, excuse me. Co-regulation is when I notice that you're feeling something, and I want to be helpful and supportive to you. Co-regulation is when I'm teaching or leading this webinar, and I want to intentionally shift the emotions. Okay? It's co-regulation starts in infancy, right, with our babies, where we're doing that back and forth, the cooing, the little blowing in the face, the rocking, to help deactivate the nervous system. Okay, that's co-regulation. So healthy co-regulation is about comforting, comforting, coaching, modeling, reinforcing. Unhealthy regulation is minimizing, shaming, and gaslighting. Okay, so Robin, who many of you know on my team, who does a lot of work in gaslighting, you can co-regulate in a very unhealthy way by minimizing someone else's emotions. Why are you so sensitive about that? Get over it. Move on. Why would you be worrying about that? Leave it alone. Like, suck it up, buttercup. Really? That's what you're going to be worrying about? I would just don't let it bother you. That is unhealthy co-regulation. It's dismissive. It's not warm, and it's not caring. Intentional co-regulation is something separate. Next is we're co-regulating constantly. The question is, do we do it skillfully or not? And I thought we would spend a little bit of time on this because this is really interesting to me, which is around the intersection of attachment styles and co-regulation. Can everybody see the connection there? That the way our moms or dads or caregivers co-regulate with us can lead us to having a secure and anxious, avoidant, or disorganized coping attachment style. Let me put you on the test. What are ways that you think parents could unhealthily, that's even a word, co-regulate a child's emotion to make them feel, let's start with the kind of avoidant. What would be an unhealthy co-regulatory strategy that might lead to an avoidant attachment style? Maybe ignoring the child, as someone is saying, dismissing. When you think of an avoidant attachment style, what comes up for you for that? How do you define an avoidant attachment style? Right? These are adults who have difficulty even approaching people, right? They have a hard time being intimate. They have a hard time connecting. Blaming, ignoring, dismissive. criticizing constantly. Yeah. What about anxious? What might produce an anxious attachment style? What do we think? How would we even define an anxious attachment style? What do we think? I think when you think about um, this kind of avoidant, let's go back to the avoidant for a minute. It's like this discomfort with closeness, more withdrawn, cold and distant, um, kind of kind of retreat in a more like avoiding emotional connection. Like intimacy is really tough for the avoidant types or the dismissive avoidant types. What about for the anxiety types? When we think about the anxious or preoccupied attachment style, I know what comes to mind for me are things like insecure about the stability of the relationship. They can be very clingy and needy, often worry about their commitment. Like, are you sure? Are you sure? They're second guessing themselves. Um, Oftentimes, the anxious kind of security, anxious attachment style is someone who kind of fears rejection or abandonment. So, thinking about how we as adults are co regulating our kids' emotions, it just makes total sense that there are certain behaviors, for example, for avoidant or the anxious style, that might lead to, poor, to these attachment styles. All right, let's jump to the secure one. Let's end with the healthy. So, how do we define a secure attachment style? A secure attachment style is someone who is kind of comfortable in their own skin. Um, they're emotionally available. They're comfortable being vulnerable, sharing difficult feelings with their partner. They're not that preoccupied. They're not that worried if like someone doesn't like them. Um, they have the capacity to be alone. It's just someone who can sit in a restaurant and just sit there and like wait for somebody and not be self-conscious, like looking at their phone or like trying to make themselves busy. They can just, I'm good. I can be here. I have the capacity to be present alone and not being preoccupied that people, oh my God, people are going to think that I'm this or people are going to think I'm that. That's the secure attachment style. Any questions about those three basic styles? There's also the kind of disorganized one, which is just a kind of a mix of the anxious and avoidant. I'm looking at people's things here. I think, when you are an Uncle Marvin, right? When you are non-judgmental, an active listener, and showing your compassion and empathy, that is helping to create the secure attachment style. It's not the parent who's like, oh my goodness, honey, is everything okay? Right? Or, like, figure it out. You're on your own, kiddo. It's that give and take. It's that play. It's, appropriate risk taking. It's, for example, the child who's anxious climbing up the mountain or hiking, the anxious parent, honey, be careful, be careful, be careful. That's not a healthy form of co-regulation, right? You're creating anxiety in your kid. Whereas the healthy kind of person with emotion would say, honey, I want you to be careful. Make sure you do these two things so you're safe. I believe that you can do it, and try it now. And I'm going to come help you if you feel a little nervous, but I really think you can do it. Do you see how that would just like almost kind of when the child is fearful trying something new, how your style of co-regulating could lead to these different attachment styles being formed? Does that all make sense? What do you think, everybody? Make sense? Any questions about this slide before we jump forward? Or not jump forward, but move forward. I think that people who grow up with a secure attachment style are more likely to choose people with that style because it's just easier in life. It is funny how, the story is the anxious will find the anxious, the avoidant will find the avoidant. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Some attractiveness studies show that we kind of may choose or select on those things, and then we find out the attachment style later, which makes things difficult for relationships. But it is quite remarkable. It's almost like certain people with certain attachment styles, like if you have the anxious or ambivalent, you can be a little intimidated by the person with the secure attachment style. The disorganized one is kind of the mix of anxious and avoidant. You kind of go back and forth between um, you are uncomfortable in this, and then you're avoidant there, and then you get anxious there. That's what the disorganized is. Kind of like it's the two kind of difficult ones put together. All right, let's try. Let's keep going. So I wanted to make sure that we all saw that the prime framework for goals applies to co-regulation. So if I let's do this with adults now. So let's do a workplace example. And I'm actually going to put you into the spot of being the teacher right now. Give me a clear example of how in a workplace situation that if you knew someone really well, you could use a preventative approach to co-regulation. That's a big test. Give me some examples. A preventative approach to co-regulation. Think of a scenario, an example that you can imagine where you would be using healthy co-regulation in a preventative way to support someone's regulation or well-being. This is the difficult in-class homework assignment part of the book club. I want an example of how you could use healthy preventative co-regulation. Wow, it's a lot. So remember, this is co-regulation. So you're thinking about someone else. You're having an other orientation here. So use humor. That wouldn't be preventative. That would be kind of an initiative. That would be the I in ruler. You would initiate it in that moment. How would you do preventative regulation? Being present in the moment only, laugh about something. Hey, I know these situations make me anxious. How about you? Non-judgmental listening. I was thinking about it like this way. So I know that one of my employees gets nervous when they hand me a paper and I look at it in front of them. They feel like I'm like my pierced eyes are like ripping them to shreds. And so a preventative strategy might be You know what I'd love you to do? I'd love you to drop off the paper, let me look at it for 15 minutes, and come back, and then we'll kind of go through it together. Do you see how that way? I'm intentionally supporting that person and not feeling anxious by anticipating how they might feel and regulating and kind of using a strategy in a preventative way. How does that sound to you as a kind of a proactive preventative approach to co-regulation? It's not codependence, um, because it's trying to be helpful. And some people just, you know, I'm the big boss, even though I don't even imagine myself as being the big boss, but some people get intimidated. And so giving them the space to not have to watch me grade because I make weird facial expressions when I read things. People always think I'm angry or like ripping it to shreds. And so if I do that and it makes people uncomfortable, I mean, they could tolerate it if they had to, but why not just say, you know what? I'm going to give you 15 minutes to go get a coffee. Maybe pick me one up too. I want an Americano. That's 8 ounces with an inch of skim milk. Actually, I hate skim milk, whole milk, steamed. Um, Jokingly there, and come back and then we'll go through it together. I've just give you like a clear example of how it's like if I like some people have different processing speeds. I happen to be someone who has a fast processing speed. So, like when I give presentations, I have a number of talks coming up this week. I tell people I don't like to prepare. I want to be challenged in the moment. You can rip me to shreds. You can say whatever you want to say. I'm good. Um, Other people um, really need time to process. That's not a weakness. That's just who they are as human beings. And so if you know that about that person, then why would you want to put them in a situation where they're going to get flooded? It's not your job to, you know, to change their temperament or personality. And so you would, if you knew that about someone, you might just say, um, I know you need some time to process. And so let's meet up in 10 minutes. And not be that, that person who like the fast person who has to like have the solution that minute. Is that a good example? Does that make any sense? Just looking at people are saying that's good. It's giving space, perspective taking, empathy. Um, yeah, excellent. So, all right, that was the hard. I think the prevention one is the one that we think of the least. Um, let's think of initiate in terms of a co-regulation strategy. What do you think? Give me an example, a workplace example where you would be intentionally initiating an emotion to achieve a goal. Got some ideas? I'll give you mine. Um, so I do a lot of public speaking, as many of you know, and I sometimes am like, oh my gosh, this audience. Either it's like a cultural thing, they don't get the neurotic Jewish New Yorker guy, and I'm like, oh shit, my humor is not working here. I better shift my style, or um, or they're just tired, and I will just figure out like what do I got to do in this moment to like get them on my bus. So I'm kind of co-regulating them by initiating humor or initiating inspiration through telling a story that gets them to reflect, or initiating. I want them to reflect deeply, and so I'll do it. Read a poem or something um, that will cause them to reflect. That's me intentionally initiating an emotion to achieve a goal. So smiling at someone we were speaking, lifting the mood through small group collaboration, thinking of a positive experience you look forward to, anticipating an event. Okay. So, are we clear about how we can apply prime to co-regulation? Give me a minute. Let me give you a minute to just come back. Any questions or anything I can help to clarify how we can apply the principles of prime to co-regulation? I find it really interesting, but then again, this is what I do for a living. Pep talk for teams. Any questions about prime for co-regulation? All right, well, you're trying to think about that. Um, there's a few things that we just need to be remembering. That minimizing is obviously damaging. We don't want to say be a big boy or get over it or suck it up or toughen up, right? It dismisses the child or a colleague or friend or partner, right, and imprints unhelpful strategies. Um, and then I want to spend a little bit of time on this next thing because it is becoming, interestingly enough, a point of contention for me because somehow or another, people have come to believe that the work that we do in schools in particular is about coddling or it is about indulging of emotion. And so I just want to say upfront, well, it's not upfront anymore. I want to say right now that healthy emotion regulation is not allowing someone to wallow. It is not saying, I am here for you to um, talk ad nauseum about your feelings. That is unhelpful. And research by other people even shows that when we vent for too long of a period, it actually kind of like metastasizes the problem. I mean, how many of us, have been in a situation? I know I had this happen about, I don't know how many years ago. It was a good 7 years ago. Something happened in a relationship with someone I used to work with, and they started gossiping about me. And I was like, how could you gossip about me? Like I was nice to you. But anyway, it happened. And I found out about it through someone else at someplace else. And I was just so upset about it. I had a hard time like believing it. And I called every freaking person I knew. I'm like, can you believe this? Can you believe this? Can you believe this? Like 15-minute phone calls, 10 people. What is that? 4 hours of whatever, 3 hours of venting. Hang up the phone. Mission unaccomplished. Mark has now repeated himself 15 times about why he's upset about this particular person and has received no support, no perspective on it. Do you see how um, we don't want to? It's not like I don't want someone to say to me, Mark, move on. Like, how often do you speak to this person? Get over it. No, that's dismissive. Or, I know. Tell me more. Tell me more. Some people love that, don't they? They love digging in. I used to have a relative like that. She would wait for bad things to happen and then call you to want to talk about it forever. Anybody have anybody like that in their family? So it's not that. It's not over identifying. It's not ignoring. It's balancing empathy and perspective, indulgence versus support. And so it's about that art of saying, I hear you. I see you have a need that needs to be met. Let me think of ways that I can connect with you to help you not feel alone in this, but shift you to um, seeing it in a different way. So let me ask you now that I've said this, what do you think are some of the best open-ended questions that you could ask people um, to help them not feel like you are controlling them, not that you're dismissing them, but gently guiding them to kind of like pause a little bit from the kind of talking about the experience that's kind of not gonna that's venting and kind of like outward ruminating, pulling back and gaining some perspective to sort of begin to think about how to get out of this spiral. What do you think? What are some of those questions? I'm gonna give you a second to think about that because it's not easy. So someone is saying, what would have worked better for you in that situation? What's actually at the bottom of um, that's something else. How can I offer support to the extent you need it? What do you need from this conversation right now? Intruding with curiosity, asking questions. What's important to you about that? What emotion is here for you right now? What do you think you need to handle the anger, sadness, worry? What would be helpful to you right now? So I think those are beautiful, open-ended questions that, you have to know how to say it so the person doesn't feel like you're like bored with them or kind of had enough with them. Um, you can ask them to think about it through the lens of, what does help look like for you right now? What do you need right now? That's great. Now, let's do a real situation. Imagine I read about this one in the book. Let's see what you would do if I were in this situation. Imagine you're my close friend and I just broke up with someone who is not kind, but I'm feeling really lonely and I'm thinking about going back to them. But that's like the worst freaking thing for me to do because that person was very unkind, treated me improperly. You saw them kind of embarrass me in public. So I'm like, everybody, I'm talking to you now, you as an individual. I don't know. I'm thinking about going back because, I don't know what's worse. It's like to be in that, I know it wasn't the best relationship, but, it was, better than being alone. I don't know. Just hanging out with the dogs every night is driving me crazy. And let me tell you, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. And at least the sex was good once in a while. But I'm really thinking about it because I haven't been able to find anybody else. And gosh, I think I just might be better going back. So that's my. How many of you could imagine having a friend calling you up or going out for drinks, or coffee with someone who does that? It's pretty real, I think. I hear it all the time. So, what do you do in a situation like that for healthy co-regulation? All right, let's see what people are saying. Don't collude. Maybe bring up gently thoughts or expectations. What do you need right now can be hard to answer. Listen to Dua Lipa on a loop. Don't let him in. Thank you, Kelly. What is that you miss? I'll listen to this quote. Your value isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. You are inherently worthy. What parts of you do you like about yourself when you're with him? Just listen. So this is the thing. You can, it's actually if you just, you can listen, but at some point you want to be helpful. So I'm trying to guide you to think about the ways that we can be helpful. Repeat back their last words. What part of the relationship was meaningful to you? I think this is where you have to really know the person well, try not to be manipulative, but kind of let me give you an example. So I had a friend who went through a bad divorce, and he was in a situation just like this. They had kids, and they didn't want kids to be unhappy. And I was talking to him, and he's like, I'd rather go back, and and I just said, can you remind me What was the reason why you wanted to leave the relationship in the beginning? Just maybe you can think about that for a minute. And then he went on and like, oh my God, and blah, 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 blah. And he said, now that you said that out loud, you know, does that shift any of the thoughts that you're having right now? Man, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that was like, I know I'm lonely. And so I said, so it looks like, what you're really struggling with is the loneliness factor. And that maybe that's what you think is going to help kind of manage it. But maybe we can brainstorm together about things you can do to help combat the loneliness. How does that sound to you, by the way? How does that sound to you in terms of what I just did? It's a little bit beyond, just asking the open-ended question, which could lead to kind of like someone getting a little bit annoyed. If you know them well enough, you gotta gently, since you know them, you're kind of gently going in there to kind of find a little thing to get them to reflect. You've heard 500 times that the person was a narcissist that they didn't want to be with. What do we think? Do you see how it takes a little bit of creativity? You're not saying, "Are you kidding me? That would be you moron. Why would you go back to that blank, blank, blank?" You're just sort of gently kind of having the conversation, thinking, "What's one way I can get this person to think?" I'm not going to influence their thinking. I just know the history of this person. I know their likes, their dislikes, how they've been treated, why they left their relationship. So let me kind of find my way in to get them to reflect on that, to see if they're okay with that. And if they're okay with that, then okay. But maybe they're not. They're just feeling lonely and a little bit desperate. So I'm going to kind of guide them to some more critical thinking. That's like kind of like the black belt version of co-regulation. What do we think? Listening, mirroring back, checking for interpretation, adding curiosity. I'm not bad-mouthing the person. Yeah, I'm not making any judgment. I'm just knowledgeable of the pain that they had and know that that was the reason they left. And I think they've forgotten that. So I'm kind of just inching them to go back there a little bit. Okay. So that's the magic of co-regulation. This is why this is a skill that needs to be taught. This is why in the work that we do at the Center for Emotional Intelligence in schools, we give kids scenarios and we give them opportunities to role play and practice this stuff. How many do you think that would be useful to help kids in age-appropriate ways engage in practices to help build that creative muscle of good questions based on the specific scenario to then play with it to help figure out how to be helpful to someone else's unpleasant feelings? What do you think? Do you think that that's something that's worthy of doing in education, or do you think it's a waste of time? Because that's, my passion, as all of you know, is in childhood education. I think that everybody should get their black belt in co-regulation. But, you start off with the basic questions, and then you build it and build it and build it over time so that your brain it goes with ease and flexibility in terms of, let me ask this question. Oh, let me go there. Let me see what they think about this. And it will be different. That was an example of someone feeling lonely in a relationship. It's going to be different for someone who fell off a bike, and is afraid to get back on the bike, or a horse, which is different from someone who is, afraid to go on the football field, which is different from someone who is afraid of doing the job interview. But I think this is like kind of the ultimate form of being a caring, compassionate friend, parent, partner. So what do you think? 100% wish we had this in our school 60 years ago. So worthy of time. Yep, have seen this and it works, because as adults we haven't learned about it. Oh, by the way, my friend has not gotten back together and is now going on dates, which is good. Thank you for asking. Desperately needed. I mean, I just think, my gosh, what this is real education to me. Like, this is the ultimate form of kind of emotion, cognition, problem solving, and creativity. So that's it for tonight. I wanted to really kind of unpack co regulation. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. And let's all take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. So hopefully you're working your way through the book. Um, I'm dying to see your feedback on the book. I'm hoping that some of you will leave some reviews if you bought it on Amazon for me, because I just want to see what you have to say about the book. And this will be posted on the YouTube channel in a little while after tonight's session. And remember, I'm always plugging, the How We Feel app. If you're new tonight and you haven't downloaded the app, get that app and start using it. It's free on Android and iOS. It will help you build the skills of emotion regulation. And then if you haven't looked at the YouTube channel in greater detail, this is the old banner. Now it's called Dealing with Feeling to Match the Book. But the YouTube channel, and the interviews are just fantastic. Um, People like John Haidt about the anxious generation, Angela Duckworth about grit, Jewel the singer. So check out those interviews. Um, Last week I did a friend of mine, her name is Stephanie, who is a lawyer and also teaches meditation and mindfulness. And we had just a fun conversation about, what are the moments that you can apply these strategies in the workforce. So on that note, everybody have a wonderful week. I will see you one week. Let me say that again. I will see you 1 week from tonight, same time, same channel. Please send questions to Dr. Mark Brackett at Yale.edu. And until then, may you practice healthy co regulation in all of your relationships. Bye bye, everybody.